Alex coming to you from a hot ass garage down here in South Florida. Today on this video, what I want to talk about is fuel systems. A lot of people in the ticket system specifically ask about fuel systems, constant questions that I find myself repeating over and over and over. So I thought, let me make a video. If they have any questions, I'll just send them the video link, because typing it all out and then going back and forth over a period of a couple of hours, I can just show you a video link and go, this is how the better fuel systems in the market are set up. So what we're going to talk about today is controllers, meaning how to control the fuel pumps, who controls the fuel pumps, what type of controller is one of the better ones out there in the market, the lines, what kind of lines do you want, filters, check valves, and then deadhead versus true return style. We have two ways of basically lining out a fuel system, different thought processes too. So we'll go over that, but we're going to actually use the GT500 as a reference. So this is my 2014 GT500. As you see here, I have a dual hat from 4 Innovations, an FC2 controller because it controls 2 pumps, and some of the wiring that they offer. So before we go into this, let's look in the engine bay and show you how this thing is routed. So this is the way it works. Obviously the hat is already installed in the back seat. So back here, underneath the back seat, you literally just take the old hat out, put the new hat in. Then you're supposed to wire in the fuel pumps. Now, this car has the fuel pumps wired right over here. This is, let me zoom in, an FC3 controller because it controls 3 pumps. My car has a triple pump system. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 pumps. The way this fuel system is configured currently is 2 pumps run constant, and then the third pump runs off of what we call a Hobbs switch. What's a Hobbs switch? Well, let's go to the front without cutting and show you what a Hobbs switch looks like. So this right here is a Hobbs switch. So what this does is when it gets a boost reference, right? It's getting a boost reference from everywhere. This is your fuel system boost reference. This is your fuel oil pressure. This is your boost reference coming from the manifold, the bottom manifold on GT500s. It grabs the boost reference from down there. So when this guy sees 5 PSI, okay, if you're a wide open throttle and the moment this guy sees 5 PSI, it triggers the third pump to come on. Now the way I want fuel systems configured on your car is 2 pumps running constant if you have a dual pump system. If you have a triple system, you do 2 pumps constant, third on a Hobbs. A lot of people do 1 pump constant, 1 pump on a Hobbs. The problem with that is if you're running 1 pump and you're just at the cusp of what that pump can support on E85, the delay between that and the Hobbs switch activating the second pump can cause a momentary lean spike in the data log. So I prefer you to run 2 constant on a dual pump system, 2 constant, and 1 on a Hobbs on a triples pump system like this one has here. So this car is running -8 fuel lines. To get underneath, no cutting. Okay, so these are the -8 fuel lines. These are my water lines, so just ignore these. But these are right here, -8 fuel lines. And right here, what you have is a fuel filter. So obviously before the fuel gets to the engine, we're going to want to filter it. And this is something that usually does not come in budget style return fuel systems. Now on this fuel system, they did something that I'm not a huge fan of, but they basically made it a true return style fuel system. But this car does make well over 1100 horsepower. So what they did was they put a Y in it, right? So it goes from the filter, right here, let me back up, from the filter to a Y. And what they did was, and I guess I'll show you from the engine bay side. So one of the lines comes up here, and the other line comes up here. Sorry. So basically what you're getting is this effect, right? So you're getting 2 lines coming in and then returning at the regulator and going back towards the tank. Now, what can that cause? Well, if you have constant fuel circulating over the engine bay, what happens is heat. The heat basically travels with the path of the fuel. The engine is hot, it's constantly rotating, so by the time the fuel gets from the tank to the engine and is constantly rotating, maybe about a couple of cycles, that fuel, in my opinion, gets hotter. The other way to route it is one single line to the regulator, from the feed to the regulator to one single feed to the rails, thereby pressurizing both rails, because there's a crossover pipe on the rails, and it returns at the regulator. So feed, return at the regulator, and the feed then pressurizes the fuel rails. And in my opinion, under 1,000 horsepower, that's better. Why? The fuel doesn't constantly circulate around the engine bay to get it hot, to get into the fuel tank, or get the fuel hot. Two, it has constant pressure, meaning every injector not necessarily has equal pressure, but it's pressurized. Think of your finger at the end of a water hose and theoretically poke 8 holes in the water hose. Well, your finger is the deadhead and the pressure comes out at the water hose holes. While on this one, imagine the water hose is constantly running and you have 8 holes on the hose. So the pressure, I would say, is probably more consistent, but you got to turn the pressure up to make it so that the car is happy with the proper fuel pressure. That's probably the best way I could explain this. So it comes up, come here, feeds, returns, and it crosses over this guy. And then at the back of this guy, it returns at the regulator. So it basically goes like this. Whoop, whoop, bang. Then here at the regulator, it'll return back. So you have a feed. You have a feed line right here. This is one of your feed lines. And down here, let me get the flashlight so you guys can see better. If I'm not mistaken, that's how it is. Yeah, so that guy, in my opinion, is more than likely the return, and that guy is the feed. So feed, and it returns at the regulator. So because it has a wide fuel system at the bottom, both lines come into the rails simultaneously, return back to the tank basically via maybe I'm sure the regulator kind of has to be regulated that way. I would think that this is good for really high horsepower applications, and cars that aren't necessarily street driven often. Anything over 1,100 horsepower, this is probably the way you want to do it. But to be honest with you, I'm still on the fence about that, because no one has shown me a true test of what pressure drop at the injector per cylinder per distance away from the line. No one has done that test. They just theorize, run it all over, constantly circulating, and that's better, where I could make the case that if you deadhead it, it's probably better. But again, that's not here or there. Now, what to set your regulator to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to key on, and you can see it's at 0 right now. So I'm going to key on. Okay, key on. So this car should have, see, now it's not, the pumps aren't running. What they do is they kick on, then off. But when running, this should be at 45 PSI. When you remove the boost reference, this guy, which is probably going to be tough to remove, I'll try to do it live. Yeah, I think we can do it. Let's get the car running and show you the differences in the regulator when it's running versus when it's not running. Okay, neutral, clutch in. just say, Alex, I got two 274 pumps. Just making sure you account for that in the tune. We don't control the pumps in the tune. You wire it in. So this gets battery power. These go to your pumps. All right, see? You wire it like this. These go to your pumps. The other end, I'm trying to see where the other end is. Theoretically, there should be another connector here. So I gotta go find the other deal that connects to this guy. Yeah, there has to be another wiring harness. Or, to be honest, I think I'm missing a harness because these already have to come with these little connectors at the end of them. So imagine there's these connectors at the end of them. These plug into it, then these wires go into here. Boom, 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 boom. So the moment you give it battery power, see, battery power, this guy is a beautiful, beautiful situation. Look at how it connects. Again, when you ask me why innovate for Innovations fuel systems, this is why. That's it. And then you basically run it from your battery all the way down, and then you trigger it via the stock way the car gets the fuel pump trigger. Again, all you're doing is triggering the fuel pump to come on. Not, oh, they're 224s, you got to account for that in the tune, or 274s or 285s. You got to account for that. No, we don't. You have a reference. So here's the remote, right here. What do you use to trigger the fuel pumps? I like to use the stock triggering mechanism, which is the stock fuel pump drive module wire that you splice into. You don't cut it. You splice into the factory triggering mechanism that will trigger all of this to come on. And from then on, you regulate the fuel pumps here. We have no control over the fuel pumps. So let's just talk about the hat. So this hat, as you can tell, has no bucket. Meaning, imagine this is in the tank, bam. So the fuel can slosh back and forth. So when you run an open hat like this in your fuel tank is now your bucket. So when you run under a quarter tank of fuel and you launch, whoosh, this is gonna slosh, the fuel is gonna slosh away from these screens, and you're gonna have a momentary lean spike, or maybe the car just noses over and it doesn't have a good time. So we tell people, never run under, say, a half tank or 3/4 of a tank when racing. When you're cruising, no big deal. You can probably run down to a quarter, but when you're racing, I want a full tank in this sucker, because when you launch the car and it cuts a 1-2, the fuel's gonna go back and slosh, and it's gonna go away from the fuel pump. So I tell people, always have a 3/4 of a tank or more in the tank. Also, fuel pump size. I believe there's now a 295 fuel pump, but two 285s should be able to easily power an 1100 horsepower Mustang with ID 1700s and E85. Like, no problem. If you need more pump, then you get a third 285, or you upgrade to the 295s, and you need like an ID 2000 or something like that to be able to accommodate. So when you buy a fuel system, this is why I personally say for Innovations always look at the wiring. Not a whole bunch of wirings and relays. You get an FC2 or FC3 controller. You get a plug and play harness and connectors. Same thing you get with this guy and the pumps. Get at least two 285 pumps. Don't play around. Just get two 285s. And anytime somebody says a budget return fuel system, don't walk, run away from a budget return style system. In my opinion, it's not worth it, in my opinion, to run it. It is the lifeblood of your engine. There's no reason to run a return style fuel system. For Innovations, two 285s, plenty for 1100. Plug and play. FC2 controller for 2 pumps, FC3 controller for 3 pumps. Everything's plug and play. You have to have a filter. You have to have a -8 line. You have to regulate it like I told you to regulate it on this video. So hopefully this video gives you an idea as to the basics of setting up a fuel system in your Coyote or GT500 to set you up for a winning ride at the track with minimal problems. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you later.